78% of designers say AI makes them more efficient, but only 32% say they can actually rely on its output. So if you want to defer that level of judgment to something that's been trained on slop, then go for it.
Everyone's arguing about whether AI is going to replace designers. I think that's the wrong question. It already replaced some things in the design role, and I mean, outside of design as well. It's just not going to be replacing the people. And I think, the one area that it's really having a big impact on is workflows, which is a positive. I just had a discussion recently with someone about how the CEO of Figma, mentioned that AI is going to lower the floor and raise the ceiling. And this conversation and how AI is going to incorporate into a designer's role is a big part of that, right? You're already seeing it across things like content and the amount of quality drop that's happened over the last little while. But really, the people that are going to invest in properly using the tools and understanding the workflows and the context of their role are really, I think, going to raise the ceiling and increase the level of quality that we're going to see out there.
For sure. And honestly, if you're part of the AI will take our job crowd, then that's the conversation you're having. But I honestly think you've lost a bit of the plot, because the designers and production people that I talk with, that is not the story that's unfolding in businesses. It is the story that's unfolding in the news. But if you also look at the news recently, even Meta's Mark Zuckerberg dropped a recent statement that said that firing people thinking he was going to replace them with AI was a huge mistake. So maybe not a big mistake long term, but definitely a big mistake short term. So there's definitely something in the middle here that people haven't figured out. And I think it comes back to just rethinking the old model and where we are. So quick version of how people interpreted how the design process worked, or how everyone used to work before. It's the designer, we made the calls, we executed, and I say executed as pixel pushing, right? Moving things around the screen, bringing in product requirements, writing product requirements, all of that stuff. It didn't really matter which tools you were using. Some tools sped you up, some tools slowed you down, but ultimately the decision-making came down to the creatives or the designers, the production people, setting the pace and the direction of the work. But now there's this assumption that these tools, AI specifically, can just generate and iterate and ship things on their own. It's really not the reality that we're seeing and that a lot of designers are seeing. It's a bit different, actually. So what we're seeing more of is designers are leaning on AI tools to support the process, to iterate on the process. They're supplementing their existing workflows with that. And it's speeding things up in some ways and slowing things down in another way.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a good summary of where things are at. I think the Zuckerberg comment is pretty accurate of what's going on in terms of organizations right now and all the pressures that are coming from all over the place on designers and developers. I think what we're hearing a lot of is, and what we're seeing a lot of as an agency as well, is agency or CEOs and companies in the sort of mid-market to large business size are really gung-ho on AI, and they're pushing really hard, similar to that Zuckerberg, example that you gave. And they're going all in on AI, and they're ready to cut workforce. They're ready to have AI run an entire portion of their business. There's pretty wild Reddit threads of developers talking about how they're just becoming so disillusioned with their jobs because the CEOs are basically saying your job now is to basically babysit AI to produce code. And it's just we haven't seen the ramifications of it yet, but that's a perfect example of what not to do and what shouldn't be happening is basically just allowing AI to think for you. And that is going to drop the floor out in quality. I actually think these businesses that are going that aggressive without having a ground floor view of the actual role and the context and detail of how people within the organization are actually producing the work that's being done, I think it's going to have huge negative effects to the business. So yeah,
For
I mean,
sure.
like in some instances, there's pressure from senior leadership, and that is a hard thing to go through because depending on your role, like there's not a lot of influence that you could have maybe, but I think it's a short term effect that's happening, and I think the organizations that listen to and understand that employee experience is vital to understanding and to inform decision making, like those are the organizations that can be sort of influenced a lot better.
For sure. And I think like the production people that are letting AI think for them, like they're powerful tools, but the stuff that they generate and output is average at best. And unfortunately, that gets a pass from the C-suite and director levels because of the efficiency behind it. It actually doesn't get a pass from people who are doing quality control. Contra did a recent study on AI prompts and the designs that it got. So they'd have a prompt and then they would have a design and then they would have a creative director approve that design to go into production or not. And very few of them actually made it through, but a few did, right? So it's like average at best is what you get. I've got a stat from Figma too that basically validates that. 78% of designers say AI makes them more efficient, but only 32% say they can actually rely on its output. So you literally have that from production people who are the gatekeepers of quality and brand and like your company's voice. So if you want to defer that level of judgment to something that's been trained on slop, then go for it. It's going to be a race to the bottom. It's going to be a race to average. So,
Mhm.
and I think that's the biggest concern.
Okay, so yeah, I mean that all makes sense. So what do you do if you're in an organization and I mean there's two types of organizations right now. I'd say there's the organization that you kind of got a bit of a top-down pressure from CEOs saying like we're leaning in hard. Like if you're a designer or developer, like we're gonna start doing as much of your job with AI as possible. And then the second sort of archetype is an organization that just has a lot more freedom to explore and start incorporating good AI practices into your role. I think the first one is the harder one. Like it depends on the organization, but if it's a very like leadership decision making style of business, the best thing you can do to sort of like influence that is to be a part of the conversation. You likely, I would imagine, in roles like that, what I'm hearing, anyways, is that there's very little ability to influence the decision. But I think ultimately, like those are experiments that are probably going to fail. And I think just keeping track of how AI and how that approach is affecting the product or service or workflows within your organization are probably good things to bring up and start discussing with your teams to try to steer the ship a little bit in the opposite direction. And then obviously like the companies where you have more freedom to explore. I mean, I think like building out some parameters and starting to build out some of your own workflows and ideas for how to incorporate AI into the workflows that support the role are good practices. But yeah, what do you think, Simon?
Yeah, I mean it's a lot to cover and it also varies depending on the business that we're
Hmm.
talking about. Like we started off this conversation basically saying like AI didn't replace designers, it replaced workflows. So I do think that if you've got a design team internally, right, or if you are an agency, I think the parameters change pretty drastically with the type of organization you are. So, a product company, they're going to have a design and a development team. So their strategy is going to be very different than an organization that's in regulations, for
Hmm.
example. They probably don't even have an internal team beyond just a few marketing people here and there, right? So, like with that framed, let's focus on designers and production. I would say move your best people upstream. Like you can't be spending senior judgment on production. You need to be spending it on what's actually like worth spending the time on. So with that, like you've got this new breed of designer coming around too, like the generalist designer, which was like people were starting to specialize long ago, but the generalist designer has like come back because it's allowed us to do things in code and 3D and tools that we never normally would have used because they were gate kept by just the level of knowledge required to do them. But now with AI, it has decreased the barrier for working with new tools that designers never have. But you need to be in that generalist tier. And I would classify those as some of your best people. A generalist designer, someone who's curious and capable with both tech, design, taste, judgment, like they're the ones to move up the chain. And the ones I've talked to, they're more excited now than they have ever been. So there's just this reinvigoration point that reaffirms this whole like AI doomerism around design doesn't hold much water because the people I talk to in production, they are excited about design again in a way that they never used to be. And it's because so much more is accessible to them in a way that it never was before. So if it's a fragile role, if it's a specialized role, like that's going to be a challenge. But yeah, that's my tip. I don't know. Move your best people upstream. That's where I would end it.
Yeah. Okay. So lots of variability in this answer, and it could be its own topic, really. Before we close, I do want to bring up a comment that someone made that I thought was interesting. Just want to get your take on it. So the comment was about not being concerned about the ceiling, but being concerned that the lower the floor gets and the longer it lasts, people start to redefine what the median standard is, and that standard is going to be very weak. What are your thoughts on that? I don't think I agree with it, but what's your take on that?
So the concern is that the longer the floor remains lower, the lower the quality is going to be overall.
The median standard, yeah.
I mean, no, I don't agree with it. It's like, it's the same argument that professional photographers used when digital came around. Like, we're talking, I'm going to get a bit philosophical for a second here, but like, we're talking about the democratization of design tools and technology, not the democratization of taste. AI has been trained on all of that stuff. And like I said earlier in the conversation, the output is average at best. The average output is still better than most of the trash that you still see out there. So
Yeah.
it's great. Like, it's going to raise the quality of design overall to at least a average level. But then companies like ours and generalists and specialists alike who can actually utilize these tools to their full benefit, they are going to push the boundaries so much further. So I think everything is just going to ratchet further and further up. It's just like, now we're going to live in a world where, like, it's easier to make average design decisions for everyone. And that's great. That is an ideal world to live in.
Yeah, I agree with
I
that.
don't know what your take
It's
is.
funny, you mentioned democratization of tools, and actually the other thing that came up in that conversation was the democratization of everything, the software and technology, and how that's been negative. But anyways, that was just
Oh
a
my
quick
God.
aside. I think
Okay,
it's
yeah.
nice to address some of the comments that we get because they're interesting. All right, well, let's close there. AI didn't eliminate the need for designers. It's eliminated the parts of the job that were never really about design in the first place. What's left is always the hardest to teach: judgment, taste, restraint, and the willingness to build something with a soul instead of just shipping something fast. That's how we're going to end it off today. If you're interested in more content like this, we also just did a recent episode about how people are using AI, talk about democratizing technology, how people are using AI to sue websites over bad design. And we'll put that on the YouTube link.
Yeah. Again, quality use case.
Yes, exactly.